Thank you. All right, well, welcome everyone. Today, I am excited to present my dissertation titled A Statewide Examination of Racial Equity, Cultural Responsive Teaching, and Career and Technical Education Outcomes in Kentucky. My study explored the dynamics of racial equity, policy, and culturally responsive teaching across diverse public school districts in Kentucky. This study is important because understanding how educational policies and practices promote equity and inclusivity is crucial amidst ongoing challenges related to racial inequality and educational disparities around the country. By examining the perspectives of district leaders, educators, and administrators, this research uncovered insights into the culturally responsive teaching practices, district policies, and their impact on CTE and non CTE outcomes. But before we dive in, I just want to thank my chair and my committee members, my family and friends for all of your support. So, as long as I've been a student, I've been passionate about history and its impact on our present. One of my favorite assignments from undergraduate was a paper where I was asked about the legacy of Brown versus Board of Education. Now, at the time, and not much has changed, I felt that the legacy was a bit complicated because while the case legally ended separate but equal, there was still a significant achievement gap in historically marginalized communities around the nation. And that's still the same nearly 70 years after this historic ruling. Now, the ruling was celebrated towards a step towards equality in education, but without intentional oversight and execution, inequities have persisted. And this was supported by this thought was supported by researchers and scholars such as Jenkins and Cleva, as they highlighted that the lack of enforcement and subsequent disparities is commonplace in the history of American policy. Now, that's not to say that there haven't been attempts to address inequities. We had No Child Left Behind in 2001, but still, like other equality minded policies before, inconsistent enforcement and monitoring efforts have allowed for gaps in educational achievement to persist. But as a result, states around the United States, such as Kentucky, have taken a proactive approach to address these issues. The Kentucky Department of Education, or KDE, has developed an equity plan known as the Kentucky Equity Toolkit to address achievement gaps in the Commonwealth of Kentucky's educational environments. In response, districts like my home district, Jefferson County Public Schools, have come up with their own racial equity plans and tools by utilizing research from scholars such as Geneva Gay and Gloria Latsing Billings, suggesting that stakeholders must champion culturally sensitive policies and practices such as culturally relevant pedagogy, CRP, and culturally relevant teaching, CRT, to facilitate the efforts to improve student outcomes regardless of their background. So, in my current role as a career and technical educator, as a business teacher at the Academy of Shawnee, I was inspired in my research to see how these type of policies and practices have directly impacted CTE. And as I was researching, I noticed that researchers like Muniz concluded in their study that limited attention has been given to these type of efforts and how they've been incorporated into CTE outcomes. Therefore, seeing an opportunity, I wanted to see what was happening in the Commonwealth of Kentucky. Now, there are a couple of terms that I will mention that are related to the framework of my study, and I just want to take a moment to highlight that for those who are not aware of these frameworks. The first one being culturally relevant pedagogy, which emphasizes cultural competence and student centered approaches. The second being culturally responsive teaching, which is CRT in the context of this study, adapts teaching strategies to students' cultural backgrounds. Now, the common belief of scholars is that utilizing these type of culturally sensitive philosophies will lead to greater student achievement, especially in historically marginalized communities and groups. Now, racial equity policies, as we talked about in relation to Kentucky's Equity Toolkit and JCPS's Racial Equity Plan, are they promote systemic change to address historical inequities through policy. And then, as I talked about being a career and technical education teacher, CTE is curriculum that prepares students for career readiness through practical skills training. So, looking at the overall purpose, I've alluded to it just in my introduction in discussing my framework and background. The study aimed to eliminate the complex relationships between racial equity policies, culturally relevant teaching practices, and responsive teaching practices, as well as current technical education outcomes by gathering insights from the stakeholders that are actively, doing the work, the district leaders, educators, and administrators. The findings of the study sought to seek to offer actionable recommendations for advancing educational equity, and can assist policymakers and other stakeholders in creating a just and more equitable educational landscape. So my study was guided by three research questions, each having a null hypothesis, meaning that there was an expectation of no statistical significance, and an alternative hypothesis, which is expecting each of the findings for each research question to establish some sort of statistical significance. The first question was through the lens of district leaders, educators, both CTE and non CTE, and school based leaders and administrators. How does the interplay between the policies for racial equity and culture responsive teaching practices affect CTE in school districts across the Commonwealth? The second question is, what are the trends across the Commonwealth of Kentucky for culturally responsive teaching practices in school districts? And then the final question was, what are the perceptions of educators and administrators about the impact of racial equity policies and access to culturally responsive teaching tools? So, to answer these questions effectively, I first needed to review the literature to solidify my understanding of my study's context. And this next slide is going to hit the key points from the literature. The first one is that systemic racism and inequalities have historically disproportionately impacted people of color and non whites. There have been policy that has been created in the name of equality, but has been ineffective in addressing systemic inequities. There are states that are creating racial equity policies that take a more targeted approach towards systemic inequalities. And CTE, as I said in my framework, does shape the future workforce through career and post secondary academic readiness, but inequities are still leaving room for improvement. So, as Dr. Burke said earlier, and my committee members will have noticed, there was a shift in my methodology. Originally, I had a qualitative approach that would allow me to interview leaders from Jefferson County Public Schools. That's district leaders, site-based, school-based administrators, and teachers. Unfortunately, I ran into a bottleneck with IRB that asked me to completely change how I was going to do the study. So the initial qualitative approach shifted to a quantitative approach, utilizing a structured survey administered through a Qualtrics platform. I utilized a targeted sampling method to ensure a representative sample, utilizing the Kentucky Department of Education to open house and connections with CTE educators around the Commonwealth. I sent out a Murray State IRB approved and reviewed informed consent form and survey to district leaders, site based leaders, and educators around the Commonwealth of Kentucky that detailed the sensitive nature of the study and informed participants that participation was voluntary and confidential. From there, I had within the survey, I had demographic questions that provided context to establish relationships between groups. Participants were asked about their understanding of racial equity, perception of district commitment to racial equity, familiarity with culturally responsive teaching tools, and the frequency of incorporating those CRT practices in their respective roles. The racial equity understanding variable was measured on a Likert scale of 1 to 5, as were the impact of district policies on achieving racial equity, confidence in the school district's commitment, and familiarity with CRT tools. The data was then analyzed using descriptive and inferential statistics. I utilized ANOVA, which is analysis of variance, which is a statistical method used to ascertain whether significant differences exist between the means of two or more independent groups on a dependent variable of interest. ANOVA was used to identify whether the differences were actually statistically significant. T-tests were also employed to compare the means of two groups and determine their statistical significance. Specifically, T-tests were used to scrutinize those differences in perceptions and responses across various demographic groups or variables, essentially. And then finally, used Tukey's test to was used in situations involving the comparison of three or more means. So as we move into the findings, we I ended up having 139 responses. The charts that you see before you represent the descriptive statistics derived from the survey data. Um, I want to note that the demographics that are highlighted in gold, that is very intentional because based off of the data, these are the demographics that show statistical significance. So, for the sake of time, I'm going to highlight those. First, being participants were asked to disclose their racial identity based on six categories as determined by the same categories used in the United States Census: white, Black or African American, American Indian, or Alaska Native, Asian, Native Hawaiian, or Pacific Islander, and some other race. The frequency, as you can see, 64% of the data set identified as white, 32.4% of the data set identified as Black. There were four individuals, so 2.9% of the data set that identified as some other race, and then one individual identified as Asian, representing 0.7% of the data set. As far as district location, the survey asked participants to select an option that best describe their district location. And as you can see, majority of the respondents came from a urban background. And sorry, in fact, 30.9% of the participants selected rural. The 25.9% of the participants selected suburban, and then 43.2% of the participants identified as urban. Based off of district role, the options that participants were given were district leadership, school-based leadership or administrator, and educator. Out of the 139 participants, 22 representing 15.8% of the participants selected district leadership, 26% representing 18.7% of participants selected school-based leadership or administrator, and 90 participants representing 64.7% of the participants selected educator. So based off these self-identified demographics, we were able to, and I say we, I mean I, sorry, was able to pull out a few questions that did show statistical significance. And before we go into the significant results, I would like to highlight those key questions. There were variations on these three questions. And based off of the statistical significance, I was able to establish correlations to be drawn in the findings. The questions related to the role that district policies play in contributing to racial equity, the extent of culturally responsive teaching integration into the participant's area of expertise, and overall familiarity with the introduction of culturally responsive teaching tools within the district. So the data represented in these tables highlights the variations in responses based off of the different demographic factors and questions posed in the study, again, utilizing ANOVA. These are the responses based off of current role. As you can see, to the question related to district policies contributing to racial equity, district leadership individuals tend to have a higher confidence in the contribution of district policies to racial equity compared to school-based leadership or admin and educators. In relation to culture responsive teaching integration into the area of expertise, again, district leadership showed a higher level of introduction, or self-identified a higher level of integration of culture responsive teaching into their area of expertise, more so than school-based leadership and educators. And then finally, familiarity with culture responsive teaching tools. Again, the district did show a higher familiarity, but not much more than school-based leadership and admin. So to me, that the takeaway there was the closer you get to the top of the district, the more aware you are of what the district is trying to do. Moving on to significant results based off of location, participants, which was very interesting, participants from rural districts expressed a higher confidence in their district's commitment to racial equity compared to those in urban districts, as you can see here, though not too significant. Urban districts, compared to suburban and rural districts, showed a higher frequency of incorporating culturally responsive teaching practices in their roles. Urban respondents also showed a higher integration into their area of expertise, as you can see here. And then again, urban districts showed a higher familiarity with the culturally responsive teaching tools as being introduced by district policies. Next, the significant results are based off of racial identity. Um, Based off of the self-identified demographics, white respondents generally expressed a higher belief in district policies contributing to racial equity than black respondents. The respondents that categorized themselves as some other race or Asian did not have a large enough sample size, which limited the reliability of the result. But as you can see, the overall belief across the respondents and participants suggested a moderate level out of the scale of 1 to 5 of agreement regarding the contribution of district policies to achieving racial equity. So I intentionally put the descriptive statistics and the inferential statistics for CTE a little bit later, since that was a part of my original topic of focus. My original assumption was that CTE educators would show a clear difference or showcase some sort of inherent awareness of the role that policies and tools play in achieving racial equity goals, because diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging are so important in business culture. However, based off of the data here, as you can see, as CTE or non CTE was not gold, it did not show statistical significance. Now, there is difference in variability between the groups, specifically focusing on the response to the question, to what extent do district policies contribute to achieving racial equity in your school district? Um, there was a positive correlation that they did believe that it does contribute, but again, it did not show any sort of heads or tails whether it mattered if it was a CTE or non CTE educator. So this takes us to the discussion section regarding our research questions. Again, I'm going to reread the research questions just so that we can all be on the same page. Through the lens of district leaders, educators, CTE, and non-CTE, and school-based leaders and administrators, how does the interplay between the policies for racial equity and culturally responsive teaching practices affect career and technical education in school districts across the Commonwealth of Kentucky? Based off of the findings, the null hypothesis was rejected. To sum it up, there was a moderate consensus regarding the effectiveness of district policies in promoting racial equity. Again, district leaders showed the strongest perception, surpassing school-based leadership and administrators. There were disparities based on racial identity, with white respondents endorsing district policies more strongly than black respondents. And then the familiarity based off of the various racial groups, as you saw earlier, the white groups weren't as familiar. So the implications of that is that the district leadership plays a crucial role in shaping perception to policy effectiveness. So for our second question, what are the trends across the Commonwealth of Kentucky for culturally responsive teaching practices in school districts, CTE and non-CTE? Again, the null hypothesis was rejected. To sum it up, urban districts excelled based off their own self disclosure in integrating culturally responsive teaching practices. Rural districts lagged in implementation of those actual practices, which revealed the discrepancy between the confidence and implementation. Because as you remember, rural districts believed that they were more likely to be doing things to ensure racial equity. And then for our third and final question, what are the perceptions of educators and administrators about the impact of racial equity policies and access to culturally responsive teaching tools, both CTE and non-CTE? The null hypothesis, again, was rejected. In this case, again, the district leaders exhibited a stronger belief in culturally responsive teaching integration within their expertise. The same, I said that before, but the same was for school-based and site-based leaders. Um, they also believed that there was a greater familiarity of those tools, and based off of the distance between the top being the district and the bottom being the educators, the findings suggest that there's an opportunity for structured intervention and CRT based integration, particularly targeting the school based admin and educators. So, in relation to the literature, the findings from the study do align with the current literature on equity in CTE. It emphasizes that it is important to address equity issues within CTE and that there is an impact on policy because of policy. The findings also emphasize the role of teachers and leadership in shaping the experiences of students of color, highlighting the need, as I said just a second ago, for additional professional development in cultural awareness. The study also suggests that there is an urgent need to address these systemic inequalities within the CTE classroom and suggests that applying CRT could dismantle such inequities. The study also emphasizes being intentional with being culturally responsive. And due to the findings not quite um, giving, in my opinion, and in what I found, giving a direct correlation between equity and CTE, there's still a need for additional research. So, upon completing the study, I recommend that leaders prioritize diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging in their practices to foster a more equitable path for along P20 and P20 meaning, from pre-K until the students get to the workforce and beyond. The study highlights a need for continued efforts to guarantee, excuse me, equitable access to education for students and fairness for all stakeholders throughout the cycle. So, in an area where diversity and equity initiatives have encountered resistance on multiple fronts, myself and other P20 practitioners must take the lead in these battles because this is a crucial undertaking. And that's really because the practices that we implement today will determine the trajectory of future P20 practitioners and our students. So, just a few limitations in the study. The first being, as you noticed when they talked about the racial identification, uh, the some other race and the Asian not really being a true may not be a truly representative of the survey. With it being, I mean, of the population, with it being an anonymous survey, there was some difficulty in ensuring respondents represented the entire population, which could have led to, potential bias from non-disclosure of that demographic information. And as representative samples are crucial for drawing accurate conclusions, that could have impacted the study's, ability to generalize results. The second being definitions of suburban and urban. There was an opportunity to provide just a little bit more context so that individuals could accurately self identify. Without that clear definition, there's a possibility there could have been inconsistent classifications with the demographics. The next being critical race theory CRT versus culturally responsive teaching CRT. For those unfamiliar, critical race theory is a framework that examines how race intersects with systems of power and privilege to perpetrate racial inequality and oppression in society. Whereas, culturally responsive teaching is culturally sensitive pedagogy and teaching. So there's a chance that, again, the same as suburban urban, there's a chance for individual bias to come in, which could have messed with the accuracy of some of the responses. And then as far as protocol design, based off of the findings, specifically talking about CTE versus non-CTE, the questionnaire may not have effectively addressed all of the research questions. And if with a better design, then that could have provided more relevant data, which would have enhanced my ability to draw more comprehensive conclusions. Now, moving forward, uh, as far as suggestions or further research, would definitely love to do a study with more diversified recruitment strategies, maybe even going strictly specifically to districts to ensure that I have a broader and more representative sample. The second one, I would love to track the trends over time. Basically, I would love to see, what the impact of culture responsive teaching and policy, what that would look like on CTE and non-CTE over 6 months or a year. And it would also be interesting to examine other states and do a comparative analysis of their practices across different regions and states, so I could identify successful strategies for both CTE and non-CTE. So, in conclusion, this dissertation, delved into the intricate relationship between policies and practices in career and technical education and non-CTE within Kentucky's educational framework. Through this comprehensive exploration of the interplay between racial equity policies, CRT practices, as well as perception of educators and administrators, valuable insights have been gained. The findings do underscore the significance of district leadership in shaping the perception of policy effectiveness and the integration of culturally responsive teaching within educational environments. While there were indications of moderate consensus on the role that district policies play in promoting racial equity, disparities based on racial identity and regional location do highlight the need for tailored approaches to address those dynamics. More so, the study suggests avenues for further research, including the need to mitigate sampling bias, conduct longitudinal studies to track the implementation and the impact of those policies and practices, and also undertake comparative analysis across different states. As these us as P20 practitioners navigate the complexities of educational equity, this dissertation serves as a call to action for collaborative efforts among stakeholders to ensure inclusivity and equity for all of our students' educational experience. As JCPS recently discovered from the inequity experience due to poor planning and recent implementation of a school choice and transportational plan, it's not enough to simply adopt plans. Educational stakeholders must implement these policies and procedures intentionally with fidelity and accountability. By addressing these challenges and fostering a more informed and equitable educational landscape, we can work towards a future where every student has access to high quality and inclusive education. Thank you to my committee for your guidance and support throughout this journey, and to the audience for your attention. And thank you. And I welcome any questions.
All right, great job on the presentation, Reggie. And so we'll open it up to questions and dialogue from the committee.
Reggie, I thought you did a phenomenal job. And as I was reading your research and listening to your presentation, I think it's really, you highlighted some interesting findings. I come from a lens from like an administrative perspective. And so a couple of things that stood out to me that I thought are key takeaways from your research is one, just the need of district administrators to disseminate their knowledge down. I think that your paper really highlights that there's maybe a disconnect from district level policy to the folks that are on the ground working day to day. And I think you addressed that also in your summation of your work. And then the second thing I thought was kind of interesting when I was reading through your research and listening to you present today is the disconnect, or maybe not the disconnect, but the difference in rural versus urban in thinking of the policy and then instituting practices. And so it makes me wonder, like, would possibly another next step for this research be to look at like the understanding, the levels of understanding of CRT and CRP at those various levels to see if there's any connection between how they view these policies impacting teaching and their level of understanding of those policies in practice. But overall, I really enjoyed your work.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Morris.
Thank you, Reggie. That was very well presented, and I appreciate hearing your perspective on this. I also made a note there, like Dr. Morris did, about that district leadership perspective and how their thoughts about how CRT is implemented throughout the school. They think it maybe is happening a little bit better than the folks on the ground. Is that a takeaway? What do you make of that?
No, I definitely think that's a takeaway. I think if you think even about corporate America, um, you know, the further up you go, the wider the view is. So, that 1,000, I mean, 10,000 foot view, it's like, yeah, things are going well because we have these tools, because we have this policy, because we have access to it. But then when implementation happens without the, district monitoring and checking in to see how that is actually happening, then the district puts itself in a position where they're just like, things are going well. And that's
Mhm.
what districts need to avoid.
Mhm. Thanks. Yeah, that's just sort of that's just kind of what I want to know about what you think. As you complete this work and have established yourself as a credible researcher and thinker on the subject, then throughout your career, you'll have an opportunity to say this kind of thing and have impact on where you are and sort of share your ideas. So I just wanted to see what you thought there about that. I had a couple of other thoughts. So when I think about, and this may just be a nature of where I am and what I do, the CTE that I work with primarily, we think about the real technical education components of CTE. So think the vocational welding, machine tool, industrial maintenance, that kind of thing. Were you
And
able to discern in the study any difference between sort of that vocational approach versus your discipline like business, computers? Were you able to distinguish the differences there in any way, or was it just sort of CTE broadly?
Thank you for that question. So it was CTE broadly. Unfortunately, as I said, there was no statistical difference between CTE and non-CTE based off of my data. I would have loved to be able to say, yeah, CTE has it figured out, but unfortunately, that's a subject for another study at this point.
Sure. Um, how did you assemble your survey document? So to think about the survey questions, can you just walk me through the process of putting that together? What did you consider? How did you construct that instrument?
Okay. So previously with my previous qualitative study was looking to get insights from those stakeholders about what were their thoughts, how did they feel about how the district was attacking equity, inequities within the district. And with the switch I had to figure out, okay, what areas do I need to cover? Well, first I wanted to make sure there was an understanding of equity, of racial equity. The second, I wanted to make sure there was an understanding of the tools that were available, and then I wanted to understand how those tools were going to be integrated. So between being inspired by the previous survey and discussions with my chair, was able to come up with a survey that I was proud of.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah, thanks. Yeah, I just was curious, sort of your thought process and things that you consulted and considered as you assembled those questions to make sure it got to the answers that you were looking for.
Thank you. Thank you.
And okay, let me think. I got two more here. So what was the overall survey population?
The overall survey population. Like I said earlier in the presentation, I went to KDE's open house, which is a database of the educators within the district, and I literally spent a couple of hours, more than a few hours, over a couple of weeks, just looking, it's like combing through information to find, uh, su- sorry, superintendent information,
Yeah,
CTE leads within the district, finding educators at different schools to send the informed consent to. So the population was just a mix of individuals from and I can tell you this, I literally sent an email to every single district in the Commonwealth of Kentucky. And
that's what I was looking for. Yeah, I was looking for. Yeah, that's the statement I was looking for, and I thought that was the case, but I was just kind of waiting for you to, yeah, to get to that. Yeah, okay, that's wonderful. Yeah, that's great. That's just exactly. Yeah, that's outstanding. And for that, I think you got a pretty good response rate actually for this kind of project. So I wouldn't be embarrassed about that at all. And then my last question. So, all right, you've completed this study. And then let's say Dr. Polio gives you a call tomorrow and says, Dr. McDaniel, what's 2 things that we can do in Jefferson County schools to address this issue? What would be 2 things you would tell him?
The first great question. The first thing I would say was talk to your educators who are actually on the front lines. Um, Ask them what's going on. Ask them, do they feel like the steps that you are taking or the board has been taking have been effective? And then the second question I would ask them is what did they say and what did you hear? Because I think that interpretation is going to lead to important decisions being made. And if we don't understand what's going on in our policymakers and decision makers' heads, we're not going to be prepared for what's to come next.
Very good. Great message. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr.
And Reggie, I gave you a sneak peek of the question that I ask advisees, and that is, what did you learn through this experience?
So as far as I'll start with myself. What I learned through this experience is that things can be hard. I want to sum it up really simply. Things can be hard. Many of you may not know this, but like I've had a couple of health complications throughout this process. I had shingles one good time. I've been sick on and off the last 2.5 years at different points in time, and of course I have a wife and 3 kids and other obligations as an educator. But what I learned is that regardless of how hard things may seem, there is an other side of this. There's an after, as I've told other people. So I've learned that, pushing through and surrounding yourself with people who are going to support you and be able to not just, pull from you, but also give back to you is very important to being the type of person that I want to be. And then as far as the study goes, I learned that first off, that people will show out if you allow them to. I had some really good, some good friends that reached out to some colleagues on my behalf to try to help me get this study done. And, I think that I left this study with a pretty good indication that Kentucky is at least trying to be on the right path with ensuring that the, population that resides in the Commonwealth of Kentucky are going in the right direction.
And then I've got a question for you. This one just popped in my head, so you didn't get a sneak peek. What advice would you offer to future students as they go down the path of preparing for their dissertations?
The first thing is build a close relationship with your chair the best that you can. They bring, and your committee, they bring a level of expertise that it's okay to say that you do not have. It's okay to say you do not know every single thing about even your subject area, but you can learn what you can. The other piece of advice I would say is don't give up just because you hit a wall. Walls happen. You got to be strong enough to knock them down. So just push through, and you will get to what you've been working so hard to attain, if that's what you choose to do.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Right now,
Can I make one quick comment? I'm sorry, Brian. I just want to make one quick comment. I am so excited to have everyone on this call with us today. And this is by far the biggest crowd I've had to attend one of these. So Reggie, that's a testament to you and your work and the support you have. And I'm so excited to see folks interested in what you're doing and interested in the topic, because this push for equity and access and better instruction for all students, that never ends. So I appreciate everybody's interest in this, particularly in Kentucky, particularly in 2024.
Great. I want to say thank you to everybody that's on. I got friends, I got family, I have colleagues and possibly students if Mr. Brewer actually showed it on the screen like you might have. So I appreciate everybody that is contributing to this dissertation.
Well, speaking of all the folks who have joined us, do any of you have questions you'd like to ask Reggie about his study?
Fourth block thinks it was great. Thank you, fourth block. And I actually have a few of my students that are in my pathway that are in there. And the fourth block that Mr. Brewer was talking about, they actually just finished their backpack of defense, is what it's called, their defensive learning. So they've been doing something similar to this. And I've been panicking as they've been panicking about theirs, because it's a prerequisite for graduation for them. So to y'all that's listening, we've been in the same boat. Hopefully we're on the other side of it now.
You know, and just think about what a testament it is to those students to basically going through a parallel path with you, and the impact that's going to have on them and other students at the academy too. So I think we need to acknowledge what that means for the young people in those settings.
They're not going to get it until later, but it's a big deal, y'all.
All right.
I think you even have students from Maryland on this. It looks like in the chat.
Yeah.
Frederick. Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah. Hey, Miss Early. one of my friend colleagues turned friends from Maryland. So I got people in Philly and Kentucky and Atlanta, and so this is awesome.
Excellent. All right, so I'm going to ask Reggie and the support crew to go into a breakout room, and then the committee will chat, and then we'll bring everyone back. Yeah. We're just sitting here for a minute waiting for everybody to trickle in.
Sorry about that. We were
No. We're good. Well, I am thrilled to be the first person, unless it's happened in the breakout room, to address you as Dr. McDaniel. You have passed your dissertation defense. You've got a few just minor edits to make, and I'll be sending those to you from the committee's members.
Thank you.
But you've done it. You've done it exceptionally well. And I said at the beginning how proud I am of you, and that's regardless of the outcome of today. But I'm exceptionally proud of you. We've certainly developed a strong connection through this experience together, and I'm very grateful for that. It doesn't always happen at that level, and so this is a really a joyful day, and I'm pumped.
Thank you so much, Dr. Morris, Dr. Parent, Dr. Burke. Thank you so much, and I hope to continue to, do right by everybody.
I know that you will. Well, now you can sigh a big breath of relief and celebrate. And really, what's next, right? Is just it's little bits of some tweaks in the document, and we'll get those knocked out and get everything submitted in Digital Commons, and that's it.
Thank you for telling me.
Congratulations, Reggie. If you ever need me for anything, or if I can ever help, let me know.
I will definitely be reaching out.
Keep fighting the good fight.
Thank you.
Congratulations. You did amazing work.
Thank you, Dr. Morris. Oof.
All right, and so now, everyone else that's on the call or on the Zoom room, thank you for being here, for showing your support to Reggie. Really just want to echo what Dr. Parent said beforehand. This is the this is the largest cheering crowd I've had on a Zoom call for a dissertation. And I'm okay if we were in. Usually we'll have a dissertation defense in one of our conference rooms. We would have had to leave to a bigger space. So that's such a good thing. And now I've got to make sure I need to actively encourage others to invite folks to be there for support. So it's a good reminder of one of my responsibilities.
Thank you for saying that. And I want to say this just to my village, and I was raised this way. My village is my superpower. So I am who I am because of who I've learned to be, and I've learned to be who I am because of them. So thank you.
All right. Wonderful.
And my wife said in the chat, thank you for supporting me through this process. And I feel the same way. So thank you. Eternally grateful. Love y'all too.
All right. Well, thank you so much, everybody. I think that wraps it up for us. And Reggie, I'll send the email to you. But I'm not going to send it right now. I want you to savor the moment and bask in this because you've earned it.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Yes, come on, Dr. Reggie.
Oh, okay. All right. I mean, it's time to close the link.
All right. We'll see you later.
I don't know if I'm gonna make it back. Oh, hey, he came back.
Woo.
All right. Thank you.
All right. I'm going to end the meeting now.
Okay, sounds good.
All right. Bye.
Bye.